Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to tackle a really big idea, one that gets misunderstood a lot. Utopianism. We hear that word and we tend to think of, what? Childish fantasies? Or maybe even dangerous blueprints for failure. But what if there's way more to it than that? Let's dig in. All right, so let's jump right into the main conflict here. It's this idea that you have to pick a side. You're either a dreamer or you're a scientist. You can't be both. And believe it or not, this one tension has pretty much shaped the entire conversation about building a better world for like the last 100 years. So picture this. On one side, you've got the utopian visionary, right? They're sketching out this perfect world. And then on the other side, you have the hard-nosed scientific revolutionary who's all about the nuts and bolts, the mechanics of history. We've been told forever that there's this huge wall between them. But is that really the whole story? Well, this is the book that really drew that line in the sand. Socialism, Utopian, and Scientific. Friedrich Engels, Karl Marx's right-hand man, he wrote this, and the whole point was to make their work sound scientific. And to do that, he had to set up an opposite. And that opposite was utopian, which he framed as, naive, pie in the sky, and just not serious. Okay, now here's where it gets really interesting. This split, it wasn't just some dusty academic debate. Nope, it was a strategic divorce. Both sides, the Marxists and the utopians, they were actively pushing each other away, and they both had their reasons. And this rejection, it was mutual and it was harsh. The scientific socialists, they basically dismissed the early utopians as daydreamers building castles in the air. Why? To clear the stage for their own big ideas. But then, fast forward a few decades, actual Marxist states start popping up, and the utopian and dystopian writers fired right back. They painted those real-world experiments as just dehumanizing, totalitarian nightmares. So all this back and forth, all this finger-pointing has left us with a totally broken and frankly unhelpful idea of what utopianism even is. We're just stuck. We hear the word and immediately associate the whole concept with its biggest, most spectacular failures. But what if we've been defining utopia all wrong this whole time? What if we've just been asking the wrong questions? What if the word isn't about some impossible, far-off paradise, but about something way more powerful and way more, immediate? And that brings us to the absolute core idea here, a really powerful redefinition from our source material. Utopianism, it's not about waiting for some perfect future to arrive after a big fight. No. It's the act of building an alternative vision, of actually trying to live out a better world, starting right here, right now. And that makes it totally different from what the source calls an anti-systemic movement. See, those movements are all about their enemy. They pour all their energy into the struggle, into the fight. And the actual creative work of building something new, that gets put on hold. That's for later, for after the revolution is won. So, with this new definition, we get a completely new toolkit for looking at these movements. It helps us see what utopianism actually looks like. And it turns out it comes in all shapes and sizes. We can kind of map them all out just by asking 3 key questions. First up is agency. In other words, who's in charge here? Who or what is actually driving the change? Is it everyday people being creative? Is it a small group of smart elites? Maybe a supernatural force like God? Or is it something like these so-called objective, inevitable laws of history? Okay, second, we've got to look at attitude. How is this utopia being built? Is it just an idea, a personal reflection inside someone's head? Is it a book or a piece of art? Or is it a small, hands-on experiment, like a commune? Or are we talking a full-blown plan to transform all of society? And the third key is scope. How big is this dream? Does this vision for a better life apply just to one person's inner world, or maybe a relationship between 2 people? A small community, an entire society? Or are we thinking even bigger, like the whole planet or even the entire cosmos? So when you combine these 3 things, agency, attitude, and scope, you can start to map out this incredibly rich and diverse landscape of what utopian thinking really is. And all of a sudden, utopianism isn't just this one single thing. It's this whole spectrum of human hope, really, from something as small as a private meditation all the way up to a global revolution. Okay. So now that we have this new toolkit, we can finally go back to that original puzzle. Was Marxism, despite how much it denied it, actually a form of utopianism, after all? And if we use our framework, the answer is a pretty clear yes. Marxism was a very, very specific kind of utopia. Let's break it down. Its agency, well, that wasn't ordinary people. It was what Marxists saw as the iron laws of history. Its attitude? Oh, absolutely transformative. The goal was to remake the entire world. And its scope? Totally societal, a global communist project. But here's the twist. Over time, Marxism started to, well, it started to abandon that creative utopian core. It got less and less focused on actually building that new communist society in the here and now. And it got more and more obsessed with the anti-systemic fight itself, the class struggle. You could say the means became the end. And this gives us a way more nuanced look at why it failed. See, the failures didn't happen just because it was utopian. They came from the limits of its specific type of utopianism. One that put its faith in abstract laws instead of human creativity. And they also came from how it gradually walked away from utopianism, turning into just a pure political struggle. So, okay, why does any of this matter? Why is getting this definition right important for us, right now? In a world that's facing some pretty huge challenges, what's the real takeaway from all this? Well, because of this, there's a great quote from the writer Lewis Mumford, and he said that the way we think and feel about the future, that directly shapes what the future can even become. So if you dismiss the very act of imagining a better world as pointless, you're not just being a pessimist, you're basically surrendering. And ultimately, this is the thing. If you lump all utopian thinking in with the failures of just one specific flawed version, that's a huge political mistake. You know who that helps? The status quo. Because if we're all convinced that any attempt to create something fundamentally better is just doomed from the start, well, we become paralyzed. We lose any motivation to even try. And that leaves us with one last big thought. If true utopianism isn't some distant blueprint for a perfect world, but it's really about building the future through our thoughts, our actions, and our relationships right here in the present, then the question is, what future are you building today?